Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Tyler Strong hears a bulldozer tearing through his quiet mountain land, he thinks it's a mistake until he sees forged documents, stolen property lines, and a plan built on lies. What starts as trespassing turns into a war, and Tyler is ready to fight back. I woke up to a low, vibrating rumble rolling through the walls of my house like an approaching storm, the kind you feel in your rib cage before you ever hear it. At first I thought it was thunder caught between the mountain ridges, but the sound didn't fade. It grew heavier, angrier, metallic. That was the moment my stomach tightened, not because I feared danger, but because I knew exactly what that noise wasn't. It wasn't anything that should legally be happening on my land. I grabbed my boots, walked outside onto the deck, and the cold mountain air hit me like a slap. The rumble echoed clearly now, somewhere past the crest of the small slope behind my house. I'd logged every inch of that hill myself, from the oak roots to the basalt ridges. There was nothing up there that should require industrial machinery. The sound alone already pissed me off. Someone was defacing my land at 8 in the morning. That was bold, suicidally bold. I took my GPS device from the drawer by the door, an old habit from my fieldwork days, and headed uphill. As I climbed, the noise sharpened into the jagged growl of a diesel engine, and soon the tree line broke enough for me to see dust rising like smoke. Then I saw it, a bright yellow bulldozer, tracks grinding my soil into a level sheet. Its blade chewing straight through the upper layer like it was clearing trash instead of land I paid taxes on. And my oaks. God, my oaks. Some were cleanly ripped out, others were reduced to splintered stumps sticking out of the earth like broken bones. I quickened my pace, not running, but with the exact kind of speed that says someone is about to regret waking up today. A handful of workers in reflective vests were scattered around, hammering stakes, measuring lines, talking like they were on a perfectly legitimate job site. I stopped a few feet from the bulldozer and raised my voice over the engine. "Cut the engine, now!" The operator blinked at me through the cab window, confused, but something in my tone, or maybe in my face, convinced him to kill the machine. Silence fell over the hilltop, thick and wrong. A guy who looked like the crew chief walked toward me, helmet slightly cocked back, clipboard in hand, wearing the universal expression of, "This better be good." "Can I help you?" he asked. "You can start by explaining why a bulldozer is on my land without my permission," I said. "Then, depending on how terrible your explanation is, you can start praying." He frowned, then lifted the clipboard like a shield. "Sir, we're authorized by Green Valley Sports Estates. We're developing a community athletic complex. According to our site maps, this section is designated easement." He handed me the map. The sheer audacity made me laugh, just once, humorless and sharp. The parcel lines on the printout were wrong by at least 100 feet. Someone had squeezed my northern property line downward like they were dragging a box in PowerPoint. My oak grove was labeled Community Green Space, and at the bottom was a signature that was supposed to be mine. It looked like someone fed my real signature into a cheap printer and hoped the toner could lie. "This is fake," I said, holding the paper up to the sunlight. "Every inch of it." "That's what HOA gave us," the crew chief said with a shrug. "If you have an issue, take it up with them." I took a deep breath. Not a calming one, but the type that clears out the last bit of restraint before action. "Great," I said, "because now you're all staying right where you are." I called the sheriff on speakerphone. "This is Tyler Strong. I have unauthorized construction equipment and crew trespassing on my land. Send a unit immediately." The workers shifted uneasily. One of them whispered to another, "I told you this looked off," while the bulldozer guy stared straight ahead, like if he didn't move, maybe he wouldn't get arrested. The sheriff's SUV arrived after several minutes, crunching over gravel. Sheriff Avery stepped out, hands on his belt, giving the scene a good, long look. I walked over to meet him. "Morning, Tyler," he said carefully. "This you're doing." "It's definitely not yours," I said, gesturing at the massacre behind me. "They're claiming HOA authorized this with fake documents." Avery looked at their map, then at the copy of my deed and GPS coordinates I pulled up on my device. His brow furrowed. "Well, both look official," he admitted, which made the hair on my neck rise. "I'll need to get county records involved." "They're on my land," I said. "That's your jurisdiction." He exhaled slowly, scratched his chin, then told the crew to cease all activity until the county clarified ownership. The chief muttered something about deadlines and permits, but no one dared restart the bulldozer, not with me still standing there. I stood on the torn earth, looking at the ruined oak stumps like fallen soldiers. My land, my responsibility, my fight. And if Green Valley Sports Estates thought for a second that I wouldn't burn their entire operation to the ground over this, they were about to learn exactly how wrong a group of people could be. Whatever this was, it wasn't a mistake. Someone engineered it, someone forged it, and someone was going to regret assuming I wouldn't notice. The sheriff's SUV hadn't even cleared the bend in the road when I crouched beside one of the uprooted oak stumps, brushing my hand across the raw, torn wood. These trees had been here longer than most people in this county. They survived fires, floods, droughts, and the occasional idiot hiker with a hatchet. But they couldn't survive a bulldozer hired by an HOA that didn't even have jurisdiction past their ornamental gate. The sight didn't make me sentimental. It made me methodical. There's a particular kind of calm that settles in when you realize someone's crossed a boundary they should never have touched. It's not anger, it's purpose. I headed back down to the house, grabbed my archival folders, and spread them across the dining table. Every map of my land since the day I bought it lay in front of me. County plats, surveyor notes, geological overlays, even hand-sketched diagrams I'd made when I still thought drawing was relaxing. I compared the HOA's map from memory against the real thing, marking discrepancies in red ink. The borders they'd drawn weren't just shifted, they were strategically engineered to carve out a perfect rectangle big enough for a field and a surrounding walkway. This wasn't sloppy, it was calculated. I pulled up county GIS data on my laptop. Everything matched my original boundaries. No revisions, no pending changes, no public notices, nothing. For a moment, I wondered if the county had uploaded something incorrectly, but that thought died instantly. Counties make mistakes, sure, but not ones that mysteriously coincide with a multi-million-dollar HOA pet project. Then I opened my email and saw the first sign that this wasn't going to stay quiet for long. A new message from Green Valley Development Committee sat at the top of my inbox with the subject line, Upcoming Community Enhancements, Owner Cooperation Required. I clicked it. The email began with, Dear Mr. Strong, as previously agreed. That was as far as I got before I laughed out loud. The kind of laugh that's more teeth than humor. They had attached a PDF labeled Signed Servitude Agreement. I downloaded it, opened it, and stared at the digital signature at the bottom. It looked like mine, down to the slight upstroke at the end of the G, but it was too perfect, like someone had traced it directly from a mortgage document, which meant someone had obtained my old paperwork. That wasn't just bold, that was felony bold. I forwarded the file to my attorney, Alice Rawl, with the message, Call me. This is about to get entertaining. Alice called within 3 minutes. You're kidding, she said, before I even finished explaining. No one forges that kind of document unless they're either stupid or desperate. And HOAs aren't usually stupid. Stupid enough to bulldoze my land, I said. Fair point. Listen, Tyler, preserve every scrap of evidence. Screenshots, timestamps, metadata. If someone forged your signature, we're not dealing with a civil dispute. This is going to be criminal. I heard her flipping pages on her desk. By the way, send me any original maps you have, and check if the signature matches anything you've submitted publicly. Sometimes these people scrape documents from online mortgage filings. It hadn't even occurred to me. I opened the county's public records database, searched my property, and sure enough, there it was. A 10-year-old scanned deed with my original signature right there at the bottom. Perfect for copying, perfect for abusing. I felt something settle inside me. Not fear, not panic, but an iron weight of certainty. They thought they found a loophole. Instead, they just documented their crime in high resolution. Next, I stepped outside and walked the perimeter again, this time with a camera. I recorded every inch of disturbed ground, every stake, every track mark. The bulldozer hadn't just scraped the land flat, it had carved into the roots of the largest oak on the ridge. I leaned close and saw fresh hydraulic fluid in a small pool beside it. Perfect. Equipment leaks mean paperwork. Paperwork means liability. As I documented everything, the late morning sun warmed the soil, releasing the sharp, earthy scent of torn ground. It made something inside me flare. This wasn't some petty HOA nonsense. This was a deliberate attempt to falsify land records and physically take what they hadn't earned. That wasn't just illegal, it was personal. When I reached the bottom of the hill again, another email notification buzzed in my pocket. This one wasn't from the HOA, but from an environmental consultant I knew, Dr. Miller. I had sent him photos earlier. He wrote, "Tyler, based on what I'm seeing, these damages qualify as ecological impact under state preservation statutes. If the trees are protected species, which I think they are, you're looking at mandatory restitution levels. Call me." Good. The more layers of violations they stacked, the harder they'd fall. I stood on my deck, looking up the slope toward the scarred patch of earth. The bulldozer sat idle now, but its tracks were still smoking in my mind. I wasn't dealing with paperwork errors or confused contractors. Somebody had decided, quietly, confidently, that they could steal from me. They were about to learn the topography of their mistake. By the next morning, the emails, calls, and documents had formed a messy constellation of evidence on my kitchen table. But it was time to move past paper trails and into the guts of whoever orchestrated this. I already had a sense of who. There's always a queen bee in these HOA hives, but suspicion needed scaffolding, proof, a foundation precise enough that even a judge with a hangover couldn't misinterpret it. At 9 sharp, I pulled up to the office of Michael Dalton, the auditor Alice recommended, a retired IRS investigator with the personality of a calculator and the instincts of a bloodhound. His office looked exactly like him, plain, orderly, and about as inviting as a tax bill. He didn't shake hands, just nodded and gestured toward a chair. "Show me everything." I handed him a stack of printouts, the forged servitude agreement, the official HOA construction plan, the contractor information, and the payment ledger I pulled from their public filings. Michael skimmed through them with the kind of quiet intensity that made me glad he was on my side. After several minutes, he tapped a page with his pen. "This contractor," he said, "Mountain Youth Sports Foundation. You see this registration date? 7 months ago. And they list their primary address as a converted storage unit. That's already a red flag." "You think they're a shell?" I asked. He snorted softly. "Please, this isn't a shell. This is a cardboard box pretending to be a bank vault." He kept scanning. Then he paused again. "Here, 2 transfers, each roughly $1 million. One listed as infrastructure development fee, another as community recreation allocation. Both came from HOA member dues. Both cleared instantly." "And?" I asked, leaning forward. "And," he said, dragging the paper toward me, "the receiving account holder shares a last name with your HOA president." I blinked. "Huntington." "Yep, registered to an Avery Huntington, same address as the nonprofit. Likely a nephew or cousin, maybe a pawn. This is textbook misappropriation, possibly conspiracy to defraud under state law, and if money crossed state lines, federal." I let out a slow whistle. They weren't just stupid, they were ambitious. Michael continued, "Also, this signature, the one meant to be yours, pulled straight from your old mortgage deed. Look, exact vector match. Somebody cropped and pasted your real signature, probably without even adjusting stroke weight. Sloppy." "Sloppy, sure, but also brazen. A forged legal agreement and a fabricated map designed to shift property boundaries? That wasn't HOA drama. That was organized crime with a homeowners association bumper sticker slapped on top." I sat back, arms crossed. "So they tried to steal part of my land, forged my signature, used HOA funds to finance a fraudulent project, and hired a fake contractor run by a family member. Anything else?" Michael didn't look up. "Give me a day." That was all he needed. By the afternoon, he called me again. His voice was as dry as the air outside. "We've got enough to bury them. I'm sending Alice the documents, but you need to see something yourself. There's a public HOA meeting tonight. President Karen Huntington is presenting the new sports initiative. I suggest you attend." Ah, showtime. I hadn't set foot in that community center in years. The last time I walked into Green Valley's HOA meeting space, it smelled like lemon disinfectant and generational wealth. That hadn't changed. Parents in athleisure gear sat chatting politely while kids ran in circles, oblivious to the fact they were about to become unwilling extras in a crime drama. I stood quietly in the back, arms folded, while Karen Huntington, tall, fit, and wearing a blazer expensive enough to pay my property taxes, took the podium. Her voice carried with the smoothness of someone who practiced speeches in a mirror. "We are proud," she said, to introduce our new youth-centered athletic development project, which will elevate Green Valley into a model community for fitness, teamwork, and academic excellence. Slides flicked across a large screen, bright green turf, bleachers, LED lighting, a paved walkway. It all looked neat and innocent, if you ignored the fact that a third of this shiny plan sat directly on my land. Karen gestured at a diagram and continued, "We have secured cooperation from local landowners, including Mr. Tyler Strong, who signed our preliminary agreement this summer." I stepped forward at the exact moment half the room began to applaud. "Correction," I said loudly. "I signed nothing." The room went silent so fast you could have heard a pin drop, or in this case, the quiet crumbling of Karen's composure. She blinked at me like I was a hallucination. "Mr. Strong," she said, smile frozen. "Perhaps this is a misunderstanding." "Not at all," I said. "But the forgery of my signature, that's a misunderstanding you'll be explaining in court." A wave of murmurs rippled through the audience. Karen held up her hand like she was swatting away gnats. "Sir, this is highly inappropriate. If you have concerns—" "Oh, I have more than concerns," I said. "I have proof. Your contractor is a shell company. Your funding transfers went to a Huntington relative. Your documents are forged, and you bulldozed protected oak trees on land you don't own." I didn't shout. I didn't need to. Calm, precise words carry farther. Karen's face shifted from shock to brittle arrogance. This community stands behind its development vision. If you try to stand in the way of progress— She didn't get to finish. A resident stood up. "Wait. Our dues went where?" Another. "You said this project was fully approved." A third panicked. "Are we liable?" Karen's expression flickered between anger and fear, and I realized something in that moment. She wasn't just corrupt. She was cornered. People like her don't panic unless the cracks are already running deep. As I left the meeting, someone hurried up behind me, a man in a windbreaker looking nervously over his shoulder. "Mr. Strong," he whispered, I have documents, financial ones. She made us sign budget reports that didn't match the books. If you're going after her, I want to help." I nodded once. "Bring everything." Tonight had gone even better than expected. The morning after the HOA ambush felt different. Not calmer, not resolved, but charged, like the air before a lightning strike. I woke up early, brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to dissolve my spoon, and sat at the table reviewing every file Michael and Alice had sent overnight. The financials were worse than we guessed. Not only had the HOA funneled money into the fake sports foundation, they had done it in increments structured to avoid internal voting thresholds. Classic laundering technique, except done by amateurs who thought QuickBooks was a vault. Around mid-morning, Michael called. "Tyler," he said, "I need you to check your email. The county just responded." I opened the message. It was short, clinical, damning. No boundary modifications, easements, or transfers involving Parcel Strong 37 have been submitted, approved, or recorded at any time in the past 15 years. If there had been any remaining sliver of doubt, the county just crushed it. HOA hadn't misunderstood anything. They'd fabricated everything. I forwarded the email to Alice, who called within minutes. "This is the nail," she said. "We're filing formally today. Trespass, ecological destruction, forgery, attempted land theft. I'm also submitting a request for federal involvement. The financial transfers crossed state lines." I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "Good, because they're still coming onto my land." "What?" "I have camera footage from last night." I opened the file, watching the infrared silhouettes of 3 contractors walking across the slope, hauling what looked like light poles. They weren't even trying to be subtle. One of them kicked a fallen oak branch out of his way like trash. Alice inhaled sharply. "Send me that, right now. This isn't just trespassing. This is deliberate continuation of criminal activity while under investigation." That was putting it nicely. I headed out onto the deck, letting the cold morning air clear my thoughts, then walked uphill to the damaged area again. I wanted to see what they'd done under the cover of darkness. The ground bore fresh tire tracks, and several long trenches had been cut in straight lines, likely where electrical conduits were meant to go. They were literally laying infrastructure for an illegal football field, as if the sheriff's warning meant nothing. If stupidity were a sport, Green Valley would win nationals. I crouched beside one of the trenches and photographed everything. Depth, width, the disturbed soil layers, even a stray scrap of cable packaging left behind. Evidence isn't just paperwork. It's the story the land tells when idiots carve into it. By noon, I was driving to the county administration building for an in-person meeting with a Department of Land Resources investigator named Ryan Collier. Tall, sharp-featured, wearing a suit that probably cost less than my boots, but looked like he meant business. He shook my hand firmly. "Mr. Strong," he said, "I've reviewed your filings. I'll be blunt, I've seen zoning violations, but never an HOA trying to redraw property lines with construction equipment." "I appreciate the novelty," I said, "but I'd like my land back." He cracked a grin, a dry one. "You'll get more than that if this goes where I think it's going." Ryan led me to a room with a table, a computer, and a wall of county maps. We overlaid my official parcel lines, GPS tracing, and the HOA's altered document. When the borders didn't align, the false shifts lit up in red. It looked exactly like what it was, fraud so blatant it bordered on satire. Then Ryan clicked to a series of satellite images. "Taken 8 days apart," he said. The first image showed my oak grove intact. The second showed the bare, scraped ground, bulldozer tracks, and newly placed stakes. This is now time-stamped proof of ecological loss. Under Colorado code, protected native species destruction carries mandatory restitution. "How mandatory?" I asked. "Very." For the first time in days, I felt a genuine, grounded certainty. They weren't just losing this fight. They were walking into the courtroom carrying the shovel they used to bury themselves. On my way home, another email arrived, this time from a district prosecutor. She requested all materials for preliminary review and asked to schedule a formal statement. That was fast, almost too fast, but I wasn't complaining. As I drove up my road, passing the ridge where the bulldozer scars glinted under the winter sun, I saw a black SUV parked near the construction zone. A man in a suit was photographing the damaged oaks. Another one was measuring soil compaction. Federal identification badges hung from their necks. Good. The cavalry wasn't coming. They were already here. By the time the sun climbed past the ridge the next morning, my driveway looked like the prelude to a federal documentary. 3 government vehicles were parked near the demolished grove, agents moving with the slow, deliberate efficiency of people who already knew something illegal had occurred and were now just deciding how illegal it was. I grabbed my jacket and walked up the slope to meet them. One of the agents, a woman with sharp eyes and a badge identifying her as Special Agent Morales, looked up from photographing the bulldozer impressions. "Mr. Strong, that's me." She shook my hand firmly, no wasted motion. "We've received preliminary materials from your attorney and the county. I'm here with the U.S. Department of Land Resources. This isn't a local matter anymore." Good. I was done thinking small. Morales led me to a temporary table they'd set up. Laptops, satellite overlays, soil samples, even a drone resting on a launch pad. She pointed to the map. Initial measurements confirmed that approximately 1/3 of the sports field footprint, including grading, trenching, and infrastructure placement, lies within your property lines. 1/3, I repeated. They were ambitious. She snorted. They were stupid. Another agent approached. A man in his 40s with the posture of someone who spent a long time reading bad paperwork. "We also found heavy machinery signatures crossing your boundary repeatedly," he said. "Your cameras will help confirm intent. If they proceeded after law enforcement intervention, we're looking at aggravated trespass." "The sheriff warned them," I said. "They kept working anyway." Morales nodded slowly. Then this just got easier. As they continued gathering evidence, a dusty pickup truck rolled up the service road. Out hopped the bulldozer operator I'd spoken to days earlier. He looked pale, like he'd just realized his construction job had become a federal investigation. I was told to be here," he stammered. Morales gestured him aside for questioning. "I caught fragments." "Wasn't sure." Karen said the owner approved. "We thought the map was real." His voice trembled. The fear of prison tends to jog memories. As the agents worked, I noticed fresh tire tracks leading from the field toward one of the HOA's maintenance sheds on their side. Morales noticed me looking and asked, "What's over there?" "HOA equipment storage," I said. "They probably kept the portable light rigs there." "Let's check it." We hiked down the slope and crossed into the HOA area. The shed door was locked, but Morales had authority and bolt cutters. Inside were exactly what I expected, but still infuriating to see. Several industrial-grade light poles, concrete footings in plastic bins, electrical conduit, and boxes labeled Sports Foundation Supplies, Priority. Morales photographed everything. All of this purchased through HOA funds, she muttered. Your auditor was right, and this foundation, it's not just a shell, it's a laundering mechanism. A shout came from outside. Another agent jogged toward us. Ma'am, you need to see this. We followed him around the back of the shed to a dumpster filled with shredded paper. The agent lifted a partially torn sheet with gloved hands. The letterhead read, Green Valley Sports Estates, Internal Development Agreement. Below it, a paragraph referencing land acquisition compliance, signed not only by Karen Huntington, but also 2 other HOA board members, people who hadn't appeared anywhere in the paperwork we'd seen so far. Morales exhaled. They didn't just act behind the HOA's back. The board was involved. The agent pointed to the shredded pile. We found multiple attempts to destroy documents. Looks like they panicked after the sheriff showed up. Destruction of evidence. That was going to play beautifully in court. By the time noon hit, a convoy of county vehicles rolled onto the HOA property. Residents emerged from their homes, gathering into uneasy clusters as uniformed deputies taped off the construction zone. Some of them whispered furiously. Others looked genuinely stunned. It's amazing how quickly support evaporates when people see law enforcement carrying out boxes from their community center. I walked back toward my house when a familiar voice called out behind me. Mr. Strong. It was the man from the HOA meeting, the one who'd said he wanted to help. He jogged up to me, clutching a folder so tightly the edges bent. These are the documents, he said, breathless. Hidden budgets, altered invoices, email chains. She made us approve expenses without seeing the actual numbers. Please, take them. I opened the folder. It wasn't just incriminating. It was catastrophic for the HOA. Altered spreadsheets, ghost vendors, forged receipts, signatures that weren't remotely authentic. And buried among them was a memo from Karen herself. Once construction is underway, the owner will have no choice but to accept the easement. Completion before inspection is critical. I stared at the line for a long moment, not because it surprised me, but because it confirmed everything. They hadn't hoped I wouldn't notice. They'd planned for me to lose. I thanked the man who looked relieved to hand off the nuclear bomb in his folder. As he hurried away, Morales approached again. Mr. Strong, she said, based on the volume of evidence already collected, we're preparing a coordinated action. Arrest warrants are likely within days. Good, I said. They earned them. She nodded once. This investigation just became a priority case. And as the agents fanned back across the wrecked hillside, gathering the final pieces of the puzzle, one thing became crystal clear. The HOA hadn't just crossed my property line. They'd crossed every legal line we had. The official summons arrived 2 days later, a formal hearing at the county courthouse. Not a trial yet. This was the kind of procedural step where the judge evaluates whether the situation is a minor dispute, a civil suit, or the legal equivalent of a live grenade rolling across the courtroom floor. Given the stack of evidence we'd collected, I had a feeling which way it would go. I showed up early, wearing the closest thing I had to court appropriate, a clean flannel shirt and boots scrubbed enough that they no longer looked like they'd recently stomped through a crime scene. Alice, my attorney, was already there, flipping through folders with the focus of someone preparing to dissect an enemy on the stand. When she saw me, she smirked. Ready to watch an HOA implode in real time? I brought snacks, I said, emotionally. We took our seats as the room filled with people, board members, residents, lawyers, trying to look calm while mentally rewriting their defense strategies, and even a few curious locals who'd apparently heard that today's hearing came with front-row schadenfreude. Then the doors opened, and Karen Huntington walked in. If arrogance could be bottled, she could have sold it at a premium. She wore a tailored suit in the color of polished steel, chin up, eyes scanning the room like she was entering a fundraiser rather than a pre-criminal proceeding. 2 board members flanked her, people I recognized from the shredded documents in the HOA shed. They kept their gazes low, like they hoped the floor might swallow them. The judge entered, everyone stood, and the hearing began. Alice rose first. Her voice was measured, crisp, and devastating. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Strong, is the legal owner of Parcel Strong 37. We are presenting evidence of fraudulent boundary manipulation, forged documents, unauthorized construction, ecological destruction involving protected species, financial misappropriation, and continued trespass after law enforcement intervention. She began laying out the exhibits, photos of the bulldozed grove, side-by-side maps, screenshots of forged signatures, aerial imagery, and a still frame from my nighttime camera showing the contractors installing light poles after the sheriff had ordered them to stop. Then Michael's financial report came next. If Alice was the scalpel, Michael was the blunt force instrument. He presented the transaction records, the fake vendor registrations, the family tie between the contractor and Karen, and the HOA board's internal communications. The judge's eyebrows rose steadily with each page, like the evidence was personally offending him. When it was the HOA's turn, their attorney, a guy with the expression of someone who wished he had followed his parents' advice and become a dentist, stood up slowly. Your Honor, the HOA operates with good intentions. The community project was approved in a majority vote, and the board relied on information provided to us, which we believed to be accurate. Any mistakes were unintentional. The judge looked over his glasses. And the forged signature? The attorney hesitated. We, are investigating the origin of that document. Perhaps you can investigate while in custody, the judge murmured, flipping to another page. Karen abruptly stood, ignoring her attorney's frantic hand signals. This is ridiculous, she snapped. We acted for the good of the community. Why should one man be allowed to block progress? He knew we needed that land. Everyone here supports me. Silence followed. Not supportive silence, the kind where people quietly shuffle away from the crazy person. One resident stood up. I don't support you, she said shakily. My dues went into this. You told us everything was approved. Another, you lied to us. A third, you forged things and used our money. Karen's face twisted. You ungrateful. The judge slammed his gavel. Ms. Huntington, sit down. Now. She sat, not gracefully. Morales, the federal agent, approached the counsel table and handed the judge a folder. He scanned the contents, expression darkening. New evidence, he asked. Yes, Your Honor, Morales said. Destruction of documents. Attempts to hide financial records, coordinated trespassing, multiple violations of state and federal statutes. The judge leaned back for a long moment, letting the weight of the case settle. Then he said the exact words I had been waiting to hear. This matter is officially elevated to a criminal proceeding. Arrest warrants will be issued immediately for Ms. Huntington and the board members involved. Furthermore, the HOA is placed under temporary federal administrative control, pending full dissolution hearings. Gasps filled the courtroom. Karen's attorney sank into his chair like a helium balloon losing air. The board members froze. Karen stared ahead, face blank, not defeated, not even processing yet, just empty. The judge continued, Mr. Strong, the evidence overwhelmingly supports your petition for restitution. Civil damages will be addressed after the criminal process proceeds. Alice gently nudged my elbow. That's legalese for they're toast. Outside the courthouse, the media had already gathered. Microphones, cameras, stunned residents, all circling the building like vultures smelling scandal. Deputies escorted the arrested board members out in cuffs. Then came Karen. She maintained her perfect posture until the moment her eyes met mine. Something flickered there. Rage, humiliation, disbelief that the world hadn't bent to her will. For once, she didn't have an audience to control, a meeting to manipulate, or a speech to hide behind. Only consequences. She was loaded into the cruiser without a word. Alice exhaled beside me. Next step is trial, she said. But trust me, they've already lost. I watched the convoy of police vehicles disappear down the road. The air felt clearer. The land behind me still bore scars, but the process of fixing those could finally begin. And as the courthouse door swung shut, I knew one thing. The HOA was finished. The real dismantling had only just begun. The courthouse felt heavier the morning of the arraignment, like the walls themselves knew what was coming. I walked in with Alice, ready for whatever spectacle the HOA had left in them, but the room was strangely quiet, not tense, more like exhausted, the kind of silence that comes after people finally accept the truth they've been avoiding. Karen Huntington was escorted in wearing cuffs, her perfect composure cracked and uneven. Behind her came Gerald, Simone, and Avery. the hollowed-out remains of the so-called board. None of them looked at each other. Guilty people rarely do. The prosecutor read the charges: fraud, forged land documents, protected species destruction, trespass, attempted land seizure, embezzlement, conspiracy. Each count was a nail sealing the coffin they'd built for themselves. The residents in the room shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered angrily. Others looked stunned, as if only now realizing the people they trusted with their community funds had been using them to bankroll crime. Karen pled not guilty, voice cracking just once. The others followed, though Gerald barely managed the words. Their attorney looked like he wanted to be anywhere except standing next to them. When Alice presented our evidence, my GPS records, the forged agreements, the drone footage, the nighttime surveillance, the judge's expression never softened. He listened, nodded, and finally leaned forward. Given the volume of evidence, he said, "This matter is formally elevated to a criminal case. Arrest warrants will be executed immediately. Additionally, the HOA will be placed under federal administrative control pending dissolution." The room erupted. Shocked gasps, angry whispers, frantic rustling of papers. Karen's arrogance evaporated the instant deputies closed cuffs around her wrists. She briefly met my eyes, but there was no fire left in her. Only disbelief that her world had finally told her no. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones rose like metal weeds. Alice nudged me to speak, so I did, simply, directly. I told them the truth. The HOA forged documents, laundered funds, trespassed on my land, destroyed protected trees, that the investigation wasn't revenge, it was accountability. By evening, headlines exploded across every local outlet. Residents finally learned how deep the corruption went. Many apologized. One man even brought me a homemade pie, which felt oddly ceremonial, like a peace treaty written in crust and sugar. But the moment that stayed with me came as I walked to my car. A woman approached quietly, arms wrapped around herself for warmth. "I'm Karen's sister," she said. "I just wanted to thank you. No one ever stopped her before." She left quickly, and I stood there, staring after her, realizing something important. This fight stopped being about my land a long time ago. It had become something bigger, something necessary. Snow fell softly the morning of the restitution hearing, settling over the ridge like a clean slate. Inside the courthouse, the final phase unfolded with none of the theatrics from earlier proceedings. No shouting, no desperate defenses, only facts and consequences stacked neatly in binders. The federal administrator summarized everything: frozen HOA accounts, seized assets, falsified budgets, illegal transfers, destroyed land. Then she announced the figure everyone had been dreading. Total liability, approximately $960,000. The room went silent. Even I felt the weight of it. This wasn't punishment. It was the simple math of undoing everything they'd broken. The judge delivered sentencing next. Karen received 12 years federal. Avery got 9. Gerald and Simone each received 3. No theatrics, no speeches, just quiet devastation as the deputies led them away. Karen didn't look at me. Maybe she finally understood that this wasn't personal. It was inevitable. Then the judge turned to me. "Mr. Strong, restitution is awarded in full. You retain oversight of federally supervised restoration on your land." It was a simple sentence, but it felt like someone cutting off the last anchor holding me to this fight. A week later, restoration specialists arrived. Ecologists examined the ruined grove, marking where new saplings would be planted. Soil engineers diagrammed water flow patterns to undo the compaction damage. Watching them work, I felt something settle inside me, a quiet sense of repair, not just of land, but of order. Meanwhile, the dissolution of Green Valley Sports Estates moved quickly. The HOA was legally disbanded, homeowners notified, and all community decisions transferred to a neutral agency. Their old clubhouse would eventually be sold. The funds would go toward restitution and penalties. A clean ending for a dirty organization. But I wanted something more symbolic. So after the final inspection, I registered a land use amendment, a protective perimeter around my ridge labeled No HOA Influence Corridor. The county approved it with almost suspicious enthusiasm. Then, on a cold January afternoon, I built a timber sign at the top of the slope. Hand-carved letters read, "Try taking my land again, and practice your handcuff pose first." Not subtle, honest. The day the first new oak saplings took root, I stood overlooking the ridge and let the quiet settle in. Not the strained quiet of conflict, but a peaceful one, the kind that comes after a storm passes and you realize the ground, though scarred, is still yours. Justice had been served, the land was healing, and for the first time in months, so was I.